Welcome to Accelerate Science Now, where we sit down with innovators shaping policy, research, and industry to ask one big question: how do we make science move faster and work better for everyone? On today's episode, I'm joined by Nick Edwards, co-founder and CEO of Potato. We discuss Nick's journey from neuroscience to entrepreneurship, the role of AI in scientific research, and its impact on the future of scientific discovery. Nick also shares some exciting insights on how Potato's new AI scientist, Tater, is revolutionizing research. Enjoy the show. Nick Edwards is the co-founder and CEO of Potato, a startup building autonomous AI agents to assist and accelerate scientific discovery. Nick trained as a neuroscientist with experience at Brown University, the National Institute of Health, and UC San Diego before shifting into entrepreneurship. At Potato, he leads efforts to combine AI, computational workflows, and lab automation to reduce the cost and time of scientific experimentation. Nick is also the host of his own podcast called Once a Scientist, where he discusses what's next for scientists and engineers working across industry and academia. Through both his company and his podcast, Nick is helping to shape a future where scientific discovery is faster, more collaborative, and more accessible than ever before. So, Nick, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks, Adeline. I'm a fan of the podcast. I'm excited to talk.
Well, great. Well, then you likely know that we always start with what early on in your life got you excited about science and made you want to pursue a career.
You know, to be perfectly honest with you, I wasn't that excited about science as a kid. Yeah,
I don't think we've gotten that one before.
yeah, I've always been interested in kind of in math, and like I had a grandfather, that was really influential in my life. He was a physician, and he was the type of person he would always ask like quizzes where it's like, you know, tell me how many raindrops are in this lake, and then I always liked kind of like teasing that apart, and I always like kind of the rational building up of ideas. But like I did pre-medicine magnet program in high school, and I remember taking neuroscience, some like neurophysiology, reading some books about that, and like thinking, I don't get it. Like, doesn't seem that interesting. So I was more into surfing as a kid, and I wound my way into college, and I remember my first class in chemistry. I didn't do so well, and so I went off and did English literature for a while, and I came back to chemistry, and
Uh-huh.
I really worked hard, and I put a lot of effort into it, and I did really well in the next chemistry class. This is actually a couple years later, and then I took organic chemistry, and that was like when like it felt like the my eyes were opened, right? And because um you in organic chemistry, it's about synthesis, and like you can think first principles about how principles build on each other, and I started to really see like the beauty of science, and just the ability to really understand like how the world works. And then I got into the lab, and kind of fumbled my way through that in undergrad, and I got excited, and I was like, and then that same professor one day was like, "Well, did you know that you can get paid if you go to graduate school?" And I was like, "Well, no, I did not know that." And so I ended up majoring in neuroscience, for my undergrad, I changed to neuroscience from English literature, and then went on to a PhD, and I just got kind of obsessed after that point. So it
Oh,
took me a while to get there, though.
yeah. Funny that there was a slow burn though, and now you're obviously very, very into it. Was there something specific in your PhD in neuroscience that you were focused on?
Yeah, so I studied the circuitry of dopamine neurons in the brain. So these are the neurons that are involved in reinforcement learning, which is relevant to AI. They're involved in addiction, and so my PhD was a joint program between Brown University and the NIH. And so I worked at the National Institute on Drug Abuse and focused on the circuitry. I had discovered some really interesting mechanisms for a drug that's actually that's used by some patients over the counter to treat drug addiction.
Wow, fascinating. And so, after your PhD and working at NIH, where did you head after that?
So I as at the end of my PhD, I was planning to continue to go into academia, and so I had some pretty good publications, and things were going well, and I found an opportunity to move to UC San Diego. I was just mentioning before the podcast, like the driver was like world class neuroscience and surf, and so
A
I'm
great
currently
combo.
yeah, right. So I've been here for a number of years since my postdoc. I left a little while to go to BCG, but in my postdoctoral research, I was focusing on the neural circuits of attention in mice, and I was
Nice.
using some techniques to record from single cells in the brain, and then stimulate all the inputs in awake animals, and figure out how does attention work at a very detailed mechanistic level in the brain. So I was planning on academia for a number of years, and I really just I love doing science. I like the hands-on nature of it, and I like kind of building models in your head. Um, but in the end, I got kind of excited and obsessed about commercialization of science, and that's after a postdoc, I had helped a friend start a company. With recording neuronal activity in animals, and we were selling some instruments, and I just got really excited. Like, I started to realize, it doesn't have to be through academic research. You can make a difference in science through commercialization as well, and like building tools to help scientists to be able to move faster.
Yeah, well, that makes complete sense. I was going to ask from focusing so intently on science, like how did you jump to that entrepreneurial spirit and start your own company?
Yeah, so, it was a process for sure for me. I After my postdoc, I took a hard, like, pivot to learn business, and so I moved to Texas for a little while to work at Boston Consulting Group as a strategy consultant, and that was a really interesting kind of, experience for me because I learned a lot about the tech industry, and that's where I started really getting, interested in learning a little bit about AI because we were working on some cases with semiconductors and just really interesting stuff. But my love has always been in the sciences, and so I came back to San Diego to work at Illumina, a large genomics companies, and have spent a number of years in the biotech industry. That entrepreneurial bug for me was kind of it started it started actually when I started this podcast, Once a Scientist. Well, it started in my postdoc first, and then when I finished up at BCG, and I used to have a lot of PhD students just reach out to me about, like, what how do I get into a consulting firm, and I would coach them, and what I realized is that there wasn't a lot of resources for scientists to figure out, like, what are different career opportunities and paths. So I started a podcast around this, and that actually laid the groundwork for some really interesting things. Like, I was being exposed to lots of new ideas. I was thinking a lot about what does the future of scientific research look like, and it was always kind of like a little side, thing that I did. Not really a business, but it felt very entrepreneurial. Um, and then I'd spent some time helping build startups. So I was an early employee at Resilience and Alloy Therapeutics, a couple companies, in the biotech industry. So I'd had some background doing that, but the drive and the impetus to start Potato, um, it really came when I started realizing that we were hitting a technology boom, and like a new inflection point from a technology perspective, where we could start to apply new ways of thinking and building out new ways of doing science using AI. And so I just got like obsessed with that. I'd been building some community around AI and biology for a couple of years, and when the idea struck, it hit hard, and it just felt like this is like a calling. Like, I don't, I don't know what else to do other than to act on it and to start something. So it was a little over 2 years ago that kicked off and started what.
Amazing. And can you tell us, like, describe in detail what exactly Potato does?
Yeah. So, um, the 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 easiest way, the most straightforward way of saying it is, like, we're building AI scientists. Um, these are AI agents that are capable of doing end-to-end research tasks. And so you can think of it as a co-scientist, something that a researcher can use in tandem to uh, come up with new ideas by surveying scientific literature, planning experiments. So we've built some tools for experimental planning, actually running experiments, analyzing data, and then that feeds into the next iteration of hypothesis testing. So closed loop research, that's really what we're going after. And so we do that for a number of different types of experiments, like computational experiments, wet lab, things that people would actually run physically in the lab.
Hmm.
And we've also started to integrate with lab robotics to be able to
Wow.
fully close that loop.
Wow. Yeah. So are there like certain types of science or types of experiments that are well suited for potato and others that are not?
Yeah, I think that's a really good question. So ones that we shine on right now, I think that people use it quite a bit for is just planning the wet lab experiments and these protocols. That's kind of an early use case, but so I'll break it down into a couple different types of things. Um, you can run end-to-end in silico experiments. Now, what an in silico experiment is like it's a computational experiment that you know it has verifiable outputs, and this was a lot of times you can use that to predict certain things that you would then go test in the wet lab. So we've built a platform that you can go in and use plain language and type out and say, I want to look at all the mutations of this potential of this protein, or let's say all the mutations. I'll give you an example of an experiment I ran recently on it. So I wanted to predict all the potential mutations of a single protein that could lead to antiviral drug resistance.
Hmm.
And so it goes in and it makes a bunch of variants for this, and then it tests them, and it uses computational tools to say, okay, these ones are evolutionarily likely, and and these mutations are close to where this uh, molecule would bind on this protein. And then it sifts them down, and it goes from a couple thousand variants into a selected list of a couple dozen. And so it allows you to basically reduce the time that you would take to actually test all those things just in the wet lab. So that's one example.
Hmm.
Another area where we're really focused on, and we've got some really exciting new tools, is the experimental planning. So it takes, this is a super complex process where every scientist has to go in there and you're reading all this literature and trying to find relevant papers and how different people did things, and you have to put together a protocol. Now this can be like a weeks long process, it can be months long. And then they'll get that working in the lab. So on Potato, you can actually go in and use plain language. It's gonna do literature review. It's gonna compare, the key elements across the different papers and how different people did things.
I mean, that
And
seems like the huge part because how do you even find all of the papers? And yeah.
yeah, yeah, it's like it's a very time consuming and fairly arduous process. And so you can get to build these protocols, but then the goal is to actually translate those into code that you could run on. Well, I mean, you're going to do it manually in the lab at times, but we've also started to integrate with lab robotics so that you can take a plain language a protocol, the step by step instructions for doing that experiment, and then translate that into code that you would run on a robot
Wow.
to.
And so does the scientist like need to know how to like write or at least edit code? Or like is that a skill that basically now all scientists are gonna have to learn in order to be using these AI scientist helpers?
That's a really interesting question. So, uh, I would say the history is that most scientists, a lot of scientists, at least in the biology space, have not historically had a lot of coding backgrounds, and that can be a rate limiting factor. Like I had to learn to code in my postdoc to do some of these
Wow.
neuroscience experiments, and I'm still not a great coder. Like I'm not the engineer on the team. I'm the CEO. But that's changed. People have gotten a lot more fluent, like early graduate students, but there's still quite a bit of like, there's definitely a language gap between what a typical scientist is thinking and like an engineer. This could be like automation engineers who are actually writing the code for this. Um, so There's been a lot more demand for that. But the interesting thing that's happening at the same time is that a lot of these AI tools are really good at actually generating code themselves. And so you can start to use plain language and you know, the the AI tools will write the code for you, and then you have to do some review over it. And so there's an element of like knowing what you want and planning it out front, and then having that help to translate it into code. Then review and run.
Got it. And so, I mean, Nick, aside from these AI scientists helping take like the arduous and maybe not as fun part of science out of the picture, what can this mean for scientific discovery and acceleration more broadly?
Yeah, I mean, I think that the one of the challenges is that the current way that we do research is, people train for 5, 10 more or more years, and they get a very specific understanding of like a certain literature. Like these are the problems, these are the techniques and the methods that I have to go after that. And so then things become very siloed, and people develop very niche areas of expertise. Um, One of the exciting things I think that the reason why I'm excited about where the future is headed is because um, then I have my individual, very specific expertise that I can use to make sure that that's kind of going the right direction, collaborating correctly. But I can also start to branch out into other areas that I might not have the time to learn all the literature around. And so,
Sure.
being able to have a broader survey of literature, ideas, and then the techniques and methods to actually run them, I think is going to just catapult the amount of research that we can do, the reach of any individual researcher, because then you can find those discoveries that are at the edges of things, because that's where the real discoveries are made, right? It's where you're combining kind of two unique ideas that you know that's a really difficult thing to do. So I think that we're going to have a massive a boost in scientific creativity and collaboration, and part of that is going to be uh, up leveling us as humans, as well as us collaborating with AI scientists in the future.
Yeah, and it sounds like there will just be so much more research out there to conduct, and I mean, this might be sort of a just a I don't completely understand the scientific publishing realm. Is there like a limited amount of like papers and research that can be published per year? Like, how are we going to get to a point where like we're just conducting more research than can be published?
I think, yeah, that's gonna be interesting. I'm excited to see kind of how things develop. There is going to be more and more research, and the kind of the publishing industry is changing. So yes, I think the output will be interesting. The models will change, and I don't know exactly, how that's going to play out. I do know that like published literature and being able to stand on the shoulders of giants is, the core element of the science is a core element of the scientific process. And so we put a lot of emphasis on pulling in the right kind of peer-reviewed, verifiable information, and making sure that it's high quality because you know the what you want to make sure is that if we're doing more science, that it's actually that the signal is high as well. It's not like you want a high signal to noise ratio essentially. You don't want to put a bunch of crap out there.
Right. You put crap in, you'll probably get crap out.
That's right.
So
That's right.
are do you have people on your team that like are in charge of determining what inputs are going into potato in your systems?
Yeah, for sure. So we have some members of the team that are focused on data science to assess the quality of individual papers, to assess the quality of the generated components to improve the performance over time. We're working closely with uh, people generators of public information or of scientific information. So we have a partnership with Wiley, for example, to pull in peer-reviewed methods, and so we're working with their current protocols team, and this is kind of a gold standard place where a lot of biological protocols are published, and so we can we do a lot of curation just to make sure that that it's pulling from verifiable information and not just like any old paper that is being published on the internet.
Yeah, well, very reassuring. Could you maybe share a couple exciting examples of work that's been done at Potato? I know yeah, it's been 2 years, so I'm sure you've got a few that you're excited about.
Yeah, we released very recently our AI scientist called Tater, and it's it it does the end-to-end work that I'm talking about, and so I'll give you a couple examples of things that I've run fairly recently that were exciting to me. We have a couple dozen alpha testers that are using it, and we're kind of building up those use cases, and the first time I used Tater was or one of the first times. I put in some data from that I had published from my PhD, and it went through and it did, all the data analysis, and it basically reproduced in 5 minutes what took me at least 5, 6 hours. This was kind of like the big breakthrough that ended up like going into this high profile Nature neuroscience paper that I published at the end of my PhD. So that was exciting because it reproduced it. And then, and then I started playing. Okay, I gave it some unpublished data, and so I had this experiment that didn't work and was kind of frustrating at the end of it. And so I put in the raw data. It did all the analysis. It did the statistical analysis. It generated graphs and figures like you would put in a scientific paper. It summarized it and it said, "Okay, hey, your experiment didn't work. Here is the statistical results." And what I had asked it though is like I said, "Help me troubleshoot what went wrong," right? And so then it pulled relevant papers from the literature historically, and then compared them, and it found out basically in about 10 minutes, it done all the data analysis, it compared against some papers, and it found um, that there was a specific reason why the experiment didn't work, and it was because I didn't put the virus in the right spot in the brain in this in this mouse animal experiment.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah, and so, it took me several hours just to do the data analysis in my PhD. Then I spent, like, 3 or 4 days trying to troubleshoot and figure out what
Yeah.
went wrong. And so, its ability to troubleshoot and just help with hypothesis generation, with experimental, planning is super exciting. I think I mentioned, the other one where, we generated, thousands of mutants, single
Mhm.
nucleotide mutants that could lead to antiviral drug resistance. I'm super excited about the ability to use computational tools. So, yeah, that's the fun thing as the CEO, I get to be the first person to try all the new tools.
That is fun. I can imagine it would almost be frustrating to know, like, wow, if I had had something like this in my PhD, I could have done so much more. Do you think that, like, do you envision at some point PhD students will have access to, AI scientists like Tater to help them?
Oh, for sure. And there's a lot of exciting companies, uh, academic projects that are being built around this, and I think agents are becoming more and more common. They're becoming more and more useful, and it's still early days. And so, as these things get better and better, I think we're gonna flood the world with the amount of science that's being done, and I'm just excited about that. I'm also, I think it's also exciting to see like tools get into hands, like capabilities get into the hands of people that have not had those capabilities previously also.
Right, I can imagine it's usually very expensive and, like, maybe impossible to be able to access the resources that a company like Potato can provide.
Yeah. Yeah.
I
Exactly.
do also have to take a step back and ask why Potato as the name?
Really? Alright, no. Yeah, so the idea was that we wanted it to be memorable and fun, and, I think of it as honestly like an operating system, because operating systems allow you to do lots of tasks in parallel, and then to, just massively scale up the amount of things that are done. And the best operating system out, or a common operating system out there is Apple, and that name was already taken, so we went with Potato.
Well, potato's pretty good. We'll have to, like, put the logo on the screen. It's one of my favorite logos I've seen. It's a
Yeah,
really good one.
there's a magic
Um
8 ball
Oh,
with
what?
potato.
That's a great I don't have it anymore. I used to always have a magic 8 ball at my desk to help me with really hard decisions,
Yeah.
pre-AI, so now yeah, now we've got other sources of help. I'd love to transition a little bit on, talking about, like, the AI and science landscape within the US. Is there something that you think is holding our country back from moving faster in deploying technologies like AI for science?
I think the biggest challenge, honestly, is behavior. It's
Mm,
people. Because, we it's a new way of doing things. And I'm learning that myself, as a scientist and as a user of AI. And so, I think, yeah, that's the biggest challenge is how do we build, uh, training programs? How do we enable people with kind of different mindsets and then just get the tools in their hands? And so, from the broader picture, I think that there I think that there's a lot to be done in terms of, training up the next generation, but also just, like, training the current generation because, um, you know, the concern that I have is that, like, um, is that not everybody will have the same access, and not
mhm.
everybody will have the same, you know, uh, um knowledge of what's out there. And so I think, there's also a big part of just what you're doing, which is like bringing these things to the forefront and to people's awareness.
Right, definitely. And so, like, in a perfect world, where do you think people would start learning about these? Would this be like in high school that, there's a new like AI for science class, like it's incorporated into existing science classes? Or at what point do you think people should
Okay, yeah.
start like learning how to use it?
Yeah, that's a great question. I love that idea. I mean, I have my kids use potato every once in a while, and they get and they
Really? What do
yeah,
they
it's
what do they use it for?
they've okay, so um they have used it to put together uh, an experimental protocol for running potato using a potato battery. Um, they've used it for
So meta.
yeah. My co-founder Ryan put together a protocol or a recipe for making homemade root beer early on with the platform, and then they'll just put in some random ideas, and it's interesting because then it takes it from a scientific perspective and it actually plans experiments. So those are like interesting trivial ideas because we have all this infrastructure that's able to translate kind of random ideas into experimental plans. And so I think that it's not it can never be too early to expose people to AI because it is going to change. I think the way that we all work, regardless of what profession you're in, whether that's science or whether that is like I don't know anything. So yeah, I think education programs at the earliest stages are interesting. If you hear of any, and if anybody out there is listening and is like, "Hey, I want to talk about potato for kids," I'd be interested in entertaining that conversation.
Oh my yeah, I mean, I'm just thinking like any like science like school-wide science fair getting to like use potato to, really ramp up what your science experiment is would be so cool. I can just imagine that like showing kids what's possible with something like this would just get you so excited to like keep trying new things.
Yeah, for sure. My daughter's in like science Olympiad, so I keep telling them like, "Hey, like I'm happy to come by and do a demo." So uh, I'll keep
Well,
you
that's so
updated.
fun. What a cool resource to have at home. That's so fun. What advice do you think you would give to early career researchers, like watching the rise of AI in their fields, like how to stay ahead and incorporate AI into their work?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So I think um, my advice is is be an early adopter of tools and just try things out and carve aside some time to uh, try and translate some of the things that you're doing into utilize AI tools. I think, but I think it's much more than that. Uh, I've been talking about kind of scientific training and for a number of years, and I think that there's always a power in going very, very deep. And if you are going into a PhD program, for example, like uh, get very specific expertise and go and dive deep while at the same time using tools to allow you to kind of understand the broader context and connect ideas. But like the scientific training is all about rigor and just training your mind to be skeptical but at the
Mm.
same time optimistic and be able to go across multiple ideas. And so yeah, I think focusing on rigor, while at the same time, being willing to try new things. There's just new capabilities and new opportunities for scientists. I don't know that I have a magic bullet necessarily, but the world is changing so fast. I'm also
Yeah.
trying to figure out how to adapt to this new way of doing things.
Right. And I think you said something interesting in there of like, it makes sense to me, like the focusing on rigor and how that can apply to AI and like making sure that it's given the best data to use as outputs. But is there a way to like have that innate human skepticism built in to these scientist programs?
Oh, for sure. Yeah. So, you can, part of that is around evaluations and benchmarking. And then you can actually you can use the LLM as judge to, you know, give it certain quality rankings and have it kind of uh, put on the lens of a critic. So one of the
Mm.
interesting things we did a while back was we had created a tool for critiquing individual papers, and this ended up being actually a tool that a lot of people have been excited about and have used. Um, and they would put in their own papers, and I put in my own papers initially, and it goes through and it's like, okay, it pulls out and it says, here were the hypotheses that were tested, here were the methods that were used, and and here's a critique of those methods. Like, could have been better with this, or the statistical analysis could have included more sample size, things like that. And that's been a very popular tool for a lot of our users. And I remember one of them early days when we had just released this tool. He had just put in a Nature paper that he had published a month before, and um, and he read through it. And I was sitting there online as he was doing it, and it at the very end it said, "Here are three follow up experiments that you could do." And he was like, "Whoa," and his eyes lit up, and I was like, "Wh what what is it?" He said, "I just put those into into an NIH grant that I just submitted." And so I
Like he
think,
had already done like the ones that it suggested, or he'd already proposed those ones?
yeah, he just proposed them for an NIH.
Wow.
Yeah, and so, I think that that's part of where that's part of where scientific insights come from, is just having that critical eye. And so, things like that, automated peer review of papers can really help with coming up with being critical, and then also kind of coming up with new ideas or little threads that you can pull on.
Yeah, wow, that's so exciting to think about. Would you say that there's something, I mean, I know there's a ton, but is there anything in particular, like, with these AI scientists that you are the most excited about?
Yeah, I think personally, it's the actual physical experimentation. Um, and, uh, lab robotics are super exciting. Lab robotics are also very prevalent in the world, actually. We've had robots for science, for quite a while, and the challenge is sometimes, like, they sit in the corner, they're collecting dust because people don't know how to use them, and they don't know how
Mm.
to translate them into, experiments, and so, I think, you know, building out kind of this intelligence layer for research so that, you can plan experiments, you can do in silico work, you can, but if you can actually connect that to the real world experiments, I think that's where it gets really interesting because biology has to be validated in the real world, and so we've built some prototyping around this and some tools to translate protocols into this code, and I think that's an area that I'm super excited about going forward as well.
And so you mentioned that a lot of times, like, they sit in the corner because people don't know how to use them, or would you say that there's a certain aspect that is, like, most overlooked where these robots can be the most helpful?
Um, I so I would say one of the big challenges that with the lab robotics is that people use them for kind of scaling up processes, mostly because it's difficult to make like inline changes to
Mhm.
how experiments are done, and it's difficult to do like early research. They're a lot of times used for more development where they're scaling up. And so I think that's where it's gonna get more exciting is where you can start to use robotics for early stage research because you can, like, more quickly modify parameters, you can and you can design experiments kind of inline really quickly. So I think that's an area that is going to start changing our ability to use robotics for earlier stage types of experiments.
Really cool. And so there's been a lot of talk about AI for science, from government to industry. I'm curious if you personally think that there's like anything that major that's like missing in those broad conversations.
That's a good question. I don't know that I have a great answer for you right now. As a founder, you become so, uh um, focused on what you're building. And so I think having some of these conversations with larger like the and maybe that's the answer is like uh, early stage startups having a better pipeline to
Mm.
have these conversations with larger organizations, with government organizations, because we have some of them. We have them with different agencies, but I think that there's more opportunity, especially as we're getting to this really interesting inflection point of um, intelligence kind of commoditizing in some ways, and science moving faster. Yeah, it's going to take quite a bit of I don't know, cross-disciplinary collaboration between industry, academia, and government. And
Yeah.
yeah, I don't know that I have a magic bullet though.
That's very fair. I mean, yeah, so I was also gonna ask, like, if you were advising policymakers, is there one thing you'd tell them to do, like, differently to ensure that US remains, like, a global scientific hub? And maybe it is that, like, involving more startups and people, like, really within the industry. But, yeah, I'd love to hear your take on that.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think involving early startups is really key because a lot of the innovation that's happening in this space is being driven by early stage companies right now, and that I think that there's probably a lot of engagement with larger companies,
Mhm.
and it's kind of staying at the edge and having that connection. I do think that there's been an interesting shift, especially from an AI perspective, into more and more industry. Um, but like we have to facilitate that connection between industry and academia as well. So yeah, I don't know. That's not kind of above my pay grade, I guess.
But no, I think that's a really excellent point that, like, it should be something that, like, everyone is involved in because there are so like, you can't expect government to be able to, write laws and really, like, understand AI the way that someone working at a startup does.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. It's just a different perspective, right?
Yeah, absolutely, and it's really important to, like, have all of those different perspectives, so really appreciate you sharing yours. I'm curious, have you thought of any way to try to combine surfing and science?
No, I should. You know, I think maybe I should get into some marine biology. I Yeah, but not quite yet. There are some, there's a surfer named Cliff Capono that is, he's a professional surfer, and he was a scientist at UCSD, and I'm kind of inspired. He does a lot of like activism around ocean and preserving the ocean, and I don't know. I just think it's if I were to go back, I would and do a PhD again. I would probably study like deep sea organisms and isolate proteins found at the bottom of the ocean.
Yeah, that's crazy stuff. I know, and this was years ago, so maybe it's not there anymore, but I know that there were people at Scripps working on like a fin that you'd put on surfboards that would measure
Oh
different
yeah.
things in the ocean. I can't remember what it was, but yeah, it seems like there's got to be a cool. Well, we'll put some stuff into potato.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah, I actually remember that company. I don't remember their name, but yeah,
Yeah,
that's right.
yeah. Awesome. Well, Nick, thank you so much for joining us, for the work you're doing at Potato, also for your podcast. It's all really exciting stuff and excited to see how it helps accelerate science.
Thanks, Adeline. Really nice to talk with you.
You've been listening to Accelerate Science Now. I'm your host, Adeline DeYoung. This show is produced by Kindred Subjects, Accelerate Science Now, and Seed AI. Our executive producers are Josh New and Austin Carson. Special thanks to Kevin King for editing and production. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next time.